Hey guys, Mad Science here, and today I am back for day number 3 of r/ProRevenge. I'm only 3 days in, and these stories are just like really long, so a lot of these episodes are gonna somehow be a lot less stories, but just as crazy. Let's get into the first story. Pro-divorce. Throwaway, as this might not make me very popular, even in Pro-Revenge. This all happened to me a few years ago. I told a friend the story of my divorce, and I was told to share. Started a few years ago. I thought we were happy. We were your usual suburban professional couple. Financially secure, healthy, good sex life, 2 kids, 14-year-old female and 9-year-old male at this time. I thought we had a healthy social life. We were going through one of your typical married couple rough patches. Both of us were working long hours, not spending enough time together. We were going through some developmental problems with my son, and tensions in the house were running a little high. I noticed that she was spending a lot more time on her phone, texting with her girlfriends. I didn't think much of it. I started making a much more concerted effort to get out of work when I could, help around the house, and be more emotionally available. But over the course of a few weeks, the gulf just kept getting wider, and wider. I ended up accidentally finding some messages when I charged up an old iPad for my son to use. Her Facebook Messenger was still logged in, and there were lots of highly questionable messages with a guy from her hometown, who I'll call Jim Bob Cooter, or JBC for short. The messages weren't completely inappropriate, but I could tell there were quite a few missing based on the times and context of the messages. I made a mental note to keep an eye on this and went about trying to fix things up. The next day, I took the day off to knock out some projects that I thought would make her happy, and left her some sweet notes reminding her how much I appreciated her. She was once again in the corner of the living room texting her girlfriends. I took the boy's iPad to the office, opened up Facebook Messenger, and watched in real time as my wife tore me down. Her and JBC were making fun of me. All of my flaws, insecurities, and secrets I entrusted to my partner were now fodder for her and JBC. Not only that, but while there wasn't outright sexting, there was a sexual undertone to the whole conversation, especially when she was bashing my performance in the sack. I managed to take some screenshots, but missed a good bit of the messages because the conversation was unfolding. As the conversation was unfolding, she was deleting them. I wasn't emotionally capable of confronting her. I stayed in the office until she was asleep and had a couple of drinks. I took off the next day and spent some time soul-searching, drinking, trying to figure out what to do. The wife came home and wanted to know what was wrong, and I just copped out and told her I had a bad day. A couple minutes later, I was watching the iPad as the train wreck kept unfolding. So began a couple solid weeks of taking screenshots, drinking, and detaching myself from the relationship. I knew there was no going back from this. The messages were now overtly sexual, with my wife completely into it, and JBC was sprinkling in I love yous. I consulted a lawyer and got my options and started moving forward. Here's where everything got absolutely surreal. Watching the messages, I found out JBC was coming to town to spend a weekend of quality time with my wife in a pretty nice hotel. I was missing a good bit of the info. They must have had a phone conversation about it at some point, but I was able to infer enough to get the when and where. Sure as shit, the next day, the wife is buttering me up and wanting to take a spa weekend with the girls to relax. When she gets back, we can really focus on our marriage. I go with it all the way. It's the greatest idea she's ever had, and I'll do anything to get us back on track. I get with the lawyer and have him draft a strong separation agreement saying that she would move out, she would get weekend visitation, no child support in the interim until the divorce is final. Then I sit through the most agonizing 2 weeks of my life. After all this, most of my feelings for her are completely gone, and I'm just seething with anger like I've never felt before. D-Day arrives. I take the day off work. I withdraw half of any money in any accounts we are joint on, leaving her half alone. I have already redirected my paycheck to a new bank. I close a money market account and get a cashier's check for her half and deposit my half in my new account. I stop at Office Max and print out about 75 pages of Facebook screen messenger screenshots, and I kill time because I don't want to be at home. She texts me that she's taken off and that she loves me. I tell her to have fun. I show up to the hotel at 8:30 and call the wife's phone from the lobby. It goes straight to voicemail. They are probably already at it. Whatever. I walk up to the front desk and ask if I can use the phone to be connected to JVC's room. It rings 3 times and he picks up. Hello? Me. JVC, can you send your wife down to the lobby, please? I don't know what you're talking about, bro. Okay then. I guess I'll have to call Mrs. JVC and get her down here. Totally a bluff. I knew he was married, and I knew her first name, but that was it. You got 5 minutes. Click. Not even 2 minutes later, my wife comes walking out of the elevator looking a little flustered. I sit her down in the corner of the lobby. Her starts spewing bullshit saying it's not what it seems, etc., etc. I'm not here to argue. The things you said are in this pile of papers. The things that are said in this pile of papers are what's going on. The only way I'm not giving a copy of this to your daughter, your parents, and emailing it to everyone we know is if you move out immediately. Wife was very prideful. Daughter was going through a rebellious teen phase, and her knowing probably would have forever killed their relationship. Wife was also her parents' golden child, and she was worried about what they thought of her. I didn't have much leverage, and shame was my only card to play. Also, her professional life is built up around her image, so I knew she would protect that at all costs. This is a check for half of the money market account. I've withdrawn my half of the money from all the other joint accounts. You should have more than enough to get a place. She starts to cry a little. I could almost see the different thoughts and waves of emotions going through her, but now was the time to keep pressing. Here is a separation agreement that I think is more than fair considering what's going on. I'm going to need you to look this over, sign it, and leave it at the house when you get your stuff. Do you want to look through these screenshots? No. Okay, have fun with JBC. Do not come back to the house, or I'm going to send this, holds up ream of screenshots, to everyone. I bounce out of the lobby. I can hear her start to have a breakdown. I get to the car, drive off to a parking lot, and have my own crying rage fit. Previously, I would have cried in front of her and yelled and whatnot, but I managed to get my shit together enough to pull it off. I don't know what she did that night or over the weekend. She texted and called over and over wanting to talk. I just turned my phone off, and by the time Monday afternoon rolled around, there were movers getting her stuff, and she delivered the agreement. I let her have a talk with the kiddos, basically saying Mummy and Daddy need some time apart, we still love you, etc., etc. Standard divorce talk. After a week, she wants to have a real talk for the first time. I oblige her because I've already got my shit together and I've got an idea of what I want, but I should hear her out. She's so sorry, she wants another chance, she wants her family back, she'll do anything. She's on her knees crying into my lap. I have no intention of ever taking her back. Ooh, brutal. I tell her she needs to set up marriage counseling on her own at a time that works for me. I tell her that I can't live with her but she should be around the children to try to maintain a relationship with them. So it starts a new normal of her coming over to the house, cooking and having dinner with the kids 3 nights a week. She always saves me a plate. I made myself scarce. Her cleaning the house and doing the kids' laundry, then heading back to her place. We went to counselling. It consisted of her working through her issues with the therapist, trying to figure out why she did it, her begging for forgiveness, and me stoically playing the victim. I was never going to give her another chance. All I wanted to do was kill time, establish myself as the primary caregiver to the kids, and establish her as not having residency in the house. After a few months, I go to my own therapist and get diagnosed with depression and PTSD. I ask my work if it's possible to go to part-time for the foreseeable future to deal with personal issues, and it's no big deal. After 6 months of therapy, I tell her that I couldn't forgive her right now and that I wanted an amicable divorce. Amicable again, just making another appearance just like that. But she's still the love of my life, and maybe someday we could give it another try. She was devastated, but agreed to the divorce if I promised to try again someday. Once the divorce was filed, I needed the kids to want to stay with me. I left a Google search for how to survive your wife's infidelity up on the shared PC at home, and I left some printed out infidelity articles not so hidden in the kitchen. My daughter found them and came to me crying. I told her she wasn't supposed to find those, that Mum made a mistake, that Mum still loves her, and that I would always be there for her. My daughter, who used to hold my wife in such high regard, now wouldn't talk to her without screaming, and it crushed her. Not surprisingly, when the court needed statements from the kids, a few months later, little brother followed big sister's lead, and they both wanted to stay with Dad in the house they grew up in. When the divorce was finalized, I got the house, had to buy out some of her equity, but that's okay. I got primary custody of the kids. I got awarded generous child support due to the difference in our incomes due to me working part-time. Now, for the last 2 years, I've gone to live in the house with my kids, work part-time, get the now ex to subsidize it for me. Subsidize. I cannot say that word. And when she takes the kids over the weekends, I get to have my fun with Tinderellas and some FWBs I've cultivated. Oh. Women on Tinder, yeah. In the eyes of my kids, I'm the patron saint of fatherhood for taking the high road and always being there. In the eyes of my ex, I'm the one that got away, that she'll always pine for, and I get the bonus of having her come over for sex whenever I want it by dangling that carrot of maybe getting back together. I don't think that's the only carrot that's dangling. But that is never going to happen. TLDR, got divorced and worked it out. See, that's how you do it, TLDR. Oh my gosh. This story is not really funny, but it's just that last line of by dangling that carrot of maybe getting back together. It's like, if you just left it at dangling that carrot, perfect in double meaning. Okay, let's move on to the second story that I have set up. The time I ruined my high school teacher's career and got fired in the greatest way possible. This story is widely known amongst my family and is constantly brought up and joked upon in my groups of friends, even years later. A buddy of mine suggested that this is the perfect place to make it public, so let's get into this shitstorm. Backstory: I was a senior in high school at the time, and I'd never been the brightest student. I was a solid C student, and I had never received a detention or any kind of bad student record. This is important because to this day, I still have no idea why the teacher treated me this way. The teacher, who we'll name Miss Frank, had been a teacher there for more than a decade and was widely known for being a petty, heartless bitch who the administrator saw as the golden child. Mrs. Frank taught algebra, which is my worst subject, so naturally I had issues understanding the lessons and would ask questions frequently. To some, these questions are easily answered, but to me, it was rocket science. Usually when someone asks a dumb question, no one should address it. However, in Mrs. Frank's case, she would belittle me in front of everyone by saying things such as, "And here comes the slow boy again. Wow, surprise, surprise, you don't understand it again. Really? We have to go extra slow for you today, don't we?" Etc., etc. I tried going to the administration about it before, but again, she was considered the golden child. They would send someone in to examine her during class. She would act respectful and all for one day, and go back to being a bitch the next. This goes on for about half a year until I had enough. I went to the local Radio Shack, bought a recorder, and secretly recorded every insult she would throw at me. Sometimes I would instigate to make up for the lost time. Go ahead, feed the fire. Fast forward to the end of the year, and I'm sitting in Mrs. Frank's class when I ask a question. Her response, and I quote, was, because it's burned into my brain, was, "I've been teaching here for 10 years, and that's the single dumbest question I've ever heard come from anyone's mouth." She continues the lesson without answering. I calmly stood up, packed my stuff, and headed to the nurse's office to dismiss myself from school. We were allowed to dismiss ourselves if we were 18. I went home, compiled all of the brutal tapes into one glorious masterpiece, and headed back the next day to show the administrators. I sat down with the principal, and we listened to a couple of the insults before he stopped me. He wanted more witnesses present, as well as Mrs. Franks. He told me we would meet the next day, where I could show him and the rest of the administrators the full tape. I walk into school the next morning being the most nervous I've ever been for anything. I was called down to the office, where I met with some board directors, the local police officer, the principal, the vice principal, and Mrs. Franks. What follows was some of the greatest minutes of my life. I watched as the administrators went from fed up with being in another useless meeting to furious and speechless, with some of them keeping their mouths open for the duration of the tape. I also watched Mrs. Franks go from confident and stuck up to her realizing that she had fucked up beyond repair. She was publicly roasting herself in front of the most important people from the district. The tape ended, and without hesitation, the administrators looked around in astonishment, and the principal turns to me and says, "I think we've heard everything we need to. Thank you." And I was quietly dismissed from the room. The final time I saw Mrs. Frank was leaving the room. I looked back, and we made eye contact through her tear-filled eyes as I gave the biggest, most evil smile. I returned to class the next week, and Mrs. Frank was nowhere to be found. The story spread quickly throughout the school, and I was seen as a saint. I had successfully gotten her fired, and made it almost impossible for Mrs. Frank to return to her teaching career, as well as cut off most of her connections she had with other teachers in the school. I had ruined her financially because no school district in the area would hire this walking piece of garbage. If you're reading this, Miss Frank, I'd like to take this moment to tell you to go fuck yourself. And TLDR, my high school teacher belittled me all year. I secretly recorded her, showed the administrators, and got her fired. Oh my god. Why go into the teaching business if you're gonna just be the rudest person in the room? Like, I don't get why people would be so rude. Like, you decided to become a teacher, and yet you just decided, I am not gonna be nice, I'm not gonna be helpful, I'm gonna be a dick. Why? Just, why do this shit? Like, if you're gonna do that, make sure you like you know everything going on in the room if you're gonna be like that, or just don't be like that and actually be helpful. Anyways, links will be in the description to my main channel and also this channel, where there's links on the screen to the playlist and the last episode. Go check them all out. At this point, there's over 90 episodes, soon going to be over 100. Ridiculous. Anyways, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when next video comes out. Ding, ding. I'm Mad Scientist. Mad Scientist